The Snowcat is an original G.I. Joe vehicle, which is often how Hasbro has decided Haslabs. Let's look at the Snowcat in more detail. The Snowcat appears to be the first version of the G.I. Joe Havoc, which appeared a year later in 1986. Both vehicles appear to be all-terrain and can work in both snow, tundra, deserts, rocky terrains, and hills. We'll go back to the Snowcat and have a comparison in a moment. The Snowcat that we saw is an update of the 1985 all-weather vehicle that was used by G.I. Joe. Like it has done with other vehicles, Hasbro has updated the Snowcat to make it more contemporary while keeping most of its classic look. The old Snowcat was primarily a vehicle that could launch missiles and torpedoes and that carried no offensive guns. If we look at old Joe ground vehicles before 1986, most had single functions. They had missiles like Covergill's Wolverine, long-range cannons like Heavy Metal's Mauler or Thunder Slugger. They rarely mix both. Now, airplanes and jets in both Cobra and G.I. Joe did mix missiles and guns before 1986, but the design and the placement of these weapons was more logical than some of the weird contraption that we saw later. Thus, the Snowcat keeps with the military logic established in older Joe vehicles, even though it was an imaginary vehicle. One thing that was apparent, though, was a lack of versatility of the old Snowcat, who carried only a missile launcher in the back and no transport capabilities. Just like they did with the Classified Hiss, Hasbro reinvented the Snowcat to make it more useful. The Classified Hiss tank was given minor troop transport capabilities, like the 1989 Hiss-2, as well as a mix of missiles and guns. The Snowcat has transport capabilities if the troops switch the missile launcher for seats in some of the convoy vehicle. It appears that the Snowcat gains 4 seating seats without the launcher. If you get at least 2 Snowcats, it's easy to imagine one of them as a troop carrier and the other one armed with the missile launcher, although the troops will be freezing in the back unless the walls of the armor are heated. The lack of gun or cannons on the Snowcat tells us that this is not a major offensive vehicle. Its primary utility is being able to travel long-range distance with just a few weapons, troops, and ordnance. Thus, as we often saw in the cartoon, it's a perfect vehicle for scientific missions, search and rescue, intelligence gathering, and surveillance. The Snowcat is not the first line of defense of your G.I. Joe troopers. It's not an offensive vehicle at all. It's a multi-purpose vehicle that drives like a bus or medium-sized truck and that can possibly carry a heavy load. It's great for difficult terrain and weather. It's equipped with a mix of wheels and threads. It's not an armored vehicle either, as the glass cockpit makes it vulnerable to frontal attacks and its troop carrier features don't seem the beefiest. Again, your troops will freeze in the back. In a way, it looks much like the Havoc that also had similar military design aesthetics. That's why the Havoc and the Snowcats are based on the same designs but are of a different generation. One would think that the Snowcat came first, as it was introduced in 1985, but it's possible that the engineers promoting this vehicle to G.I. Joe's command had difficulties making their case and thus went back to the drawing table and produced the Havoc 2, better known as the Snowcat. Both vehicles have glass front ends, which are dangerous. In the case of the Havoc, the troops lay flat instead of seating, while the pilot gunner sat unprotected at the top of the vehicle. Each had weirdly placed missiles. In the case of the Havoc, they aimed backward. With the Snowcat, there are more snow torpedoes or ski missiles. I think that the utility of having a torpedo on skis is as a polar or even marine drone that can be controlled by the Snowcat's co-pilot. Troop must put the snow torpedo on the ground and allow it to roam freely and come back to the vehicle with intelligence if needed. It can also explode or cause damage to Cobra remotely if needed. A drone like this, as we've seen in the Russian-Ukraine war, can be quite useful on the battlefield. It can detonate landmines hidden in the snow or travel in muddy or wet terrain where the snow cat and humans would falter. The snow torpedo reinforces the idea that the snow cat is not an offensive vehicle but a multi-purpose one that can perform research, surveillance, intelligence, search, and rescue. That's why the Sky missiles are protected in a case that can also pack other rescue and research gear as needed. One of the coolest features from the Snowcat, which recalls the Havoc, is the back end, which can either carry troops or a missile launcher. How about if Hasbro were to release a green Havoc 2 with a small hovercraft hosted in the same box as the missile launcher? That would be very easy for Hasbro to produce in the future. The same space used to carry troops or a missile launcher could one day carry a small hovercraft that can do surveillance and carry one pilot. The search and rescue design of the Snowcat even include a small kitchenette, which is quite useful everywhere. We see that it can freeze ice or cook food. It comes with a bivouac and a small artillery cannon. Finally, we have Lady J and Flint as fellow troopers that come with the driver Frostbite. Now, we'll get the bivouac, Flint, and Lady J only if all the targets are unlocked. The Snowcat is a much better vehicle than we thought and really helps with the world building beyond plain weapons and guns. I think that I'll back this vehicle. Now, if Hasbro could include a Canadian flag in the sticker sheets, like when I was a kid, that will make my day. This is Hervé from Comic Book Bin, filling you in since 2002. Like and subscribe.